this meeting to order. We'll have roll call, please.
Councilmember Cardenas.
Present.
Councilmember Jackson. Here. Councilmember Silva. Present. Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor Pro Tem Garcia.
Present.
And Mayor Villegas Walker.
Here. Okay, at this time, we will have our city manager lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and Council Member Cardenas in the invocation.
Yes, so ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you guys can remain standing. Precious Lord, thank you again for this evening, Lord, and we're just grateful that we can be here. Lord, we just ask that you continue to bless our community with health and wisdom, Lord, and again, we just ask that you be with us this evening. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. So thank you all for being here this evening as we start to talk about our Measure P capital projects. I had an opportunity to meet with a member of the press today, and I said, you know, I've been thinking about and anticipating this meeting for a really long time, and I think that this is probably, if not the most, certainly one of the most important city council meetings that this council has ever had. Because our determination on what these funds will be spent for, will truly shape the city of El Centro for decades to come. So our process up to this point has been very deliberate. And I want everyone to understand that some of these projects, while it sounds like, oh, well, man, are you just now thinking about that? No. I mean, I went back and started pulling some of the documentation where, you know, we've talked about what downtown's going to look like with Project Shape going back to September of 2008. We've had our library assessment, the City of El Centro, our library needs assessment. That was done for us back in 2016. We have our, you know, El Centro needs assessment. We have our police operations and data analysis. We have our Vision 2050. So I just really feel like this is a culmination of a lot of information and energy that the staff, the community, and the council has put into getting us to this point. And I'm really, really excited to hear each of the subgroups come forward to review the process a little bit, to remember that the tax was passed in November of 2016, became operative in April of 2017. To date, we've collected a little over $3.1 million. The term of the sales tax increase is for a period of 30 years. It's anticipated that that's going to range for about $5 million a year for the next 30 years, which means we have an opportunity to catch up on some long overdue projects that the city of El Centro has been waiting, hoping, looking for the money to put forward these projects. So back in October, was it October we formed the subgroups? So 2 members of council and various members of the city staff have been meeting within our particular subgroups, and now we've all come together with the individual task force and recommendations. We're going to pile this all together, take some comments, and decide where we go from here. And with that, I would like to ask our management assistant, Liz Huarte, to come up and lead us in this presentation. There'll be plenty of opportunities for public input, and thank you all in advance for being here.
Well, good evening, Mayor and council members. I'll skip the background part. You've covered it for me.
Ta-da.
Thank you. As you said, we got together. We had various working group meetings, and we want to go ahead and present those suggestions, recommendations that each working group covered. I do want to let you know and emphasize that the priority list and estimated costs will be used to determine the required size of the debt issue and corresponding debt service. At this point, the City Council will, you guys will need to determine the projects with the utmost priority and the ones that will be used to structure the bond issue. Working. The ballot language states that the ordinance will be adopted, amended, and the El Centro Municipal Code and Article 3, Section 1529, to increase the rate of the city sales tax and use tax by an additional half cent, raising 5.5 million, and that was an estimate, year until repealed by the voters, to maintain general city services and facilities, including, but not limited to, of course, the police, fire protection, library, parks, recreation, seniors, and street maintenance and upgrades. Okay. Measure P was approved back, like you said, in 2016 by the voters, effective April 2017, and the purpose was to address major capital needs.
I'm a little confused. The ballot language that's in the first slide says until repealed by the voters, but I know that we put a 30-year
30 or 20?
The
30-year time horizon in it.
30 years.
So something's,
It would have to be reauthorized after 30 years,
yeah, okay. All right,
like Measure D was.
okay.
Okay. So the bond issue that we're looking at with all the projects has been an estimated 66 million. The rate that we're currently looking at would be the 3 to 4% rate. Rate is for illustration purposes only, of course. Actual rate depends on the market, the conditions, and any other factors that may come into play during that period. The term would be at 30 years. Current debt service is 3.3 to 3.5 million. Revenue stream versus debt service. Projected revenue stream currently that we've looked at, it would be at 5 million. Estimated debt service per year, we're looking at 3.5. Excess, approximately 1.5 million to be used to absorb the fluctuations in revenues, use it as a cushion. Increase in expenditures from new facilities, operational/personnel. So our first working group consisted of Mayor Villegas Walker. That would be the ADA IT projects, working group. Consisted of the mayor, Councilmember Alex Cardenas, city manager Marcela Piedra, finance director Leticia Salcido, interim public works director Abraham Campos, human resources director Terry Brownlee, and staff Christy Walt, Frank Soto, Lindsay Herbert, and myself. So the group came together and they prioritized these projects. Oh, let me go back. They set the priority based on either safety, legal, customer service. And if you notice on your slide, it says IT Project 1. And if you look on your attachment, the next slide, it actually breaks it down, what each project consists of.
And I think what I'd like to do is we'll go through the presentation and then come back to each working group and have the members of the working group, both council and staff, address the specific priorities and give us an idea as to how those priorities were reached. If that's okay?
Madam Mayor, may I ask a question?
Yes.
So is the idea today to try to come up with a plan on the allocation of resources, specifically those that would be bonded, or are we also looking at the revenue, the yearly revenue that would be in excess of the bond payment for operations or other things?
I think that what we have discussed doing is, if there are some quick wins that, because we've already banked about $3 million. So if there's some priority projects that we can get out the door right now without incurring the bond debt, then let's get moving with those. We also know that from the point in time that the bond is issued, we have to, under the regulations, I think federal regulations, have substantial progress being made within 3 years. So I think part of what we're doing is not only establishing the priorities, but we're establishing
Funding.
the amount of money per year, and then at what point in time do we pull the trigger and go forward with the bond? Is that, okay? All right.
Okay. So would you like me to go through each part?
I think we'll come back to that
We'll come back to it,
in
okay.
a little more detail, right?
So let me go back to the other slide. So the ADA IT working group prioritized and what they thought would be priority number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Out of these, those were not the only projects that were considered. There was also the ongoing operational expenses, and that would be for the ADA component. That would be priority number 4, which is for the transition plan. Project that was removed by this group was project number 4, which you don't see on your screen. You have it on this screen here. That was removed to delay it to future, and that was decided by the group.
And we'll explain in a little more detail
Correct.
when we get to there. Okay.
So the next working group is the Community Enhancement Projects Group, Working Group. This group consisted of the mayor, Cheryl Villegas Walker, Councilmember Jason Jackson, Marcela Piedra, Leticia Salcido, previous chief Eddie Madueño, Alvaro Ramirez, Roland Banks, Abraham Campos, Lindsay Herbert, and myself. This group did not prioritize as far as the previous group. They did not consider any priority. There was no decision made. These are estimates. The reason, and I want to stress that these feasibility studies for like the police station, the animal control shelter have not been completed, and once they are completed, these numbers may change, of course. The priorities, I guess the projects that were selected were the police station, animal control shelter, the Valley Center Point Shopping Center redevelopment, and homeless initiatives.
Yeah, and I think a footnote there, just real quick, to not get too deep in the weeds right now. We've made so much progress already on the police station and the library, and I think that we know by definition that those two are priority projects. So for them, it's going to be a matter of timing on when we move forward and at what stage. So I would say definitely priorities 1 and 2, police station and the library for this working group. And then the animal control shelter, I'll have some more to say about that when we get there. And at this point, we don't have enough information on what the homeless issues would look like. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when we come back to this priority group. Okay.
This group also did point out ongoing operational expenses that will have to be funded through the Measure P revenue. Some of those ongoing expenses would be the, hold on a second here. New library, increase in operation / personnel cost, the new police station, increase in operation and personnel cost, and the animal shelter operation and personnel increase in cost. That would be approximately 1.9 million. That would have to be funded through Measure P revenue. Okay. Parks and Recreation Working Group. This group consisted of Councilmember Edgar Garcia, Councilmember Efrain Silva, staff members Marcela Piedra, Leticia Salcido, Chris Legakis, Lindsay Herbert, and myself. This group did prioritize according to the priorities that we set: safety, legal, customer service. Their priority that they suggested is the parks replacement field lighting. Second priority was Buckland renovation. Third priority, parks restroom snack bar renovation. Fourth, McGee Park renovation. And fifth, Carlos Aguilar new parking lot. Okay.
And can I ask a quick question of this group for Edgar and Efrain? How wide was your scope of inquiry? Did you look at all of the city's parks
Yeah.
and priorities and,
So we looked at that,
Space.
and this was actually very difficult.
oh, right.
Because
right.
the amount of needs that were identified farly exceeded anything that I think none of us really contemplated. So we, following the Mayor Cardenas at the time, the priority, we kind of focused on this based on the criteria that was set in terms of safety and so on. But identifying and recognizing that the net should be probably a lot broader than this, and we're gonna hear, I'm sure, from Mr. Evangelist in a while in terms of the request from ICOE to partner with the city in terms of that major soccer field project. So I think that, yes, the net was a lot wider than this, but we really didn't want to come with everything identified.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you felt that
Right.
you had the opportunity to evaluate everything.
absolutely.
And this is that. And we really appreciate having 5 projects as opposed to 15.
Right, exactly.
Okay, perfect.
One question, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
So to kind of follow up on that, Efren, it was, and I know Todd's going to obviously speak about the soccer field project. Was there, in your discussion, allocation maybe set aside or any kind of thought process of ranking that potential partnership in the 5, or would that
So-
be in essence number 6, or how would that
So
go?
I think we didn't put it on the list because there were some unknowns at the time that we still needed to get some clarification on. So we initially had a discussion of maybe allocating $1 million of Measure P money towards that effort, but in recognizing and getting some communication from ICOE later that they thought that's really a very small amount compared to the overall scope of a full implementation of that project. The other piece of the puzzle becomes the potential for the state park bond that's slated for election in June, I believe. It's a June.
June ballot.
June ballot, and we were told by our Assemblymember Garcia that that's, kind of earmarked, or not earmarked, but the language is such that would benefit El Centro in Pure Valley and the potential of receiving some revenues from there. So that was part of the discussion, and I know that's an unknown. We don't know first if it's gonna pass, and two, what the actual, benefit to the city would be. So, those kinds of variables made the discussion difficult to come up with some concrete numbers.
Sure. All right, thank you.
Okay.
And Madam Mayor, if I just want to piggyback on the park bond issue, because I did attend, and I believe Mr. Evangelist was there as well, but there is criteria in the way the bill's written that it's going to benefit desert communities up to about $50 million. And so, which would, I believe, would make us prime candidates for being a recipient of that grant. So, and again, not to make things even more difficult, but we definitely need to kind of consider, any windfall grant opportunities that we may have, as opposed of, this coming from Measure P or the general fund. But again, it's a tough mix to consider.
Well, I don't think anybody's pumping the brakes at all with regard to going after grant funding and identifying that if we are in the pipeline for the bond money, assuming the bond passes, and I think you're right, Councilmember Cardenas, I think it's for disadvantaged communities that are park poor,
Yes,
and we qualify on both
both sides.
sides. So, yeah, definitely. We're looking to leverage those dollars as well.
So just to piggyback off of that, item number 4, which was prioritized, the McGee Park renovation, I do want to let you know that we have submitted a grant under the Land and Water Conservation Fund for, I believe, $3 million. That does require, if the city is successful in the grant application, it will require a 50% cash match, which we've included in there as far as
Is
identifying it.
The item number 5, the Aguilar, the parking lot, does that qualify for air pollution control district funding?
As was pointed out, in terms of grants, we're looking at every opportunity. I know there's specific criteria, and maybe Mr. Campos can help me out. There is specific criteria when it comes to the Rule, 310 funding. But even, let's say we're successful in submitting an application, there's still a certain amount that we,
Right.
that we need to provide. But we can definitely look at those opportunities. So, Abraham, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. So 2 comments on that. One is the amount of funding. We have been successful almost every time that we'd apply for a parking lot on that one. But the funding is smaller. Each time we apply, it's in the range of anywhere between 80 and 120,000 if we get it. But the criteria requires vehicle miles travel, a reduction basically for PM10. There needs to be a previous either a roadway or a parking lot so that we can compare the pre and post. And because this is a new
Oh,
parking
okay.
lot,
I see.
There's really no reductions
Right.
because there's any emissions technically right now.
Okay, great, thank you for that clarification. Okay,
Right. So moving right along, some of the ongoing operational expenses that need to be considered would be for the new aquatic center, increase in the operational and personnel costs, 650,000. Personnel for parks, that would be approximately 170,000. Professional fees for park maintenance contracts, 200,000. And adult center programs, recreation coordinator, temp personnel, 918,000, totaling approximately 1.9 million in ongoing operational cost. The following projects were removed from the category by the working group in the Parks and Recreation Group. Not in any specific order, they were just removed. Stark Field Playground replacement, that was removed, and it will be considered during the regular budget process. Netting for the Fraser Park as well, 25,000 will be considered in the budget process. Parks equipment purchases, approximately 122,000, to be considered also during the fiscal budget process. Plank Park Phase 2 was removed because we did receive the state urban greening grant for 648,000.
is that the
aquatics-
urban tree project? No, that's something, that's in,
No,
the
that's
trees are in
That's
addition to
trees,
that. Got
actual
it,
trees.
okay, got it.
Aquatic Center slide for 750,000, not included due to anticipated increase in the construction cost.
No.
So that one's being removed. Lotus Park, which there's approximately 250 homes that will be developed. So this is anticipated to develop in the year approximately 2022, and this is for 6 million, so it's been for future. And the Parks Monte Vista project for $1 million, which at this point timeline is unknown.
Is there a trigger point on that one as well? Development of the park that for the,
Monte Vista?
Monte Vista,
Thi-
is there
this
a
is,
trigger point on that?
10 years out,
Madam Mayor,
I
this is the
believe?
project that's being proposed by ICOE.
This is the ISO,
Yes,
yes.
uh-huh.
Perfect, thank you.
One question, Madam Mayor. The Lowe's Park, is that 6 million, is that present day dollars, or are we kind of forecasting 22,000 or 2022 money,
It's present day,
present day?
yes. It's
Okay.
a 20, we would basically be required to develop a 10-acre park. And it's an estimate that we have as
Okay.
of today.
Maybe more like 8 to 10 million?
And acres, okay.
Okay, so these were the projects that were removed for the above-mentioned reasons.
Okay,
Right. And I provided just for the restroom and snack bars, one of the recommendations, the 3 parks that are being recommended are David Gomez Park. That's just the restroom. Fraser Park, it's the restroom and the snack bar renovation. And Debbie Pittman is restroom and snack bar renovation.
who are the primary users right now of the David Gomez Park? Is that the NIPM program uses Gomez, or do you?
Primarily, and Mr. Dayakis can probably add on, but it's basically what you would consider a neighborhood type of park, and that's why you see that we're not recommending a snack bar, because it's primarily used by the neighborhood. It's
Right.
really, it's the restroom facility is what's in dire need of repair.
Very good, thank you.
All right, and then I provided a picture of what the McGee Park field renovation would potentially look like for your reference. And Public Works Working Group. This working group consisted of council members Alex Cardenas and Efrain Silva, staff Marcela Piedra, Leticia Salcido, Abraham Campos, Lindsay Herbert, and myself. Please note that the green items that you see in the spreadsheet, those are potential funding sources that can be, that were identified either through LTA, RSTP, enterprise funds, or developer, okay? So for this group, there were a lot of projects. Let me go ahead and discuss the first, what was prioritized. In their working group, they prioritized, number 1, the parking lots resurface, restriping of city public downtown. Approximate cost is 500,000. Priority number 2 was identified as the parking lot resurface at the old post office pavilion, and that is approximately 119. Item number 3, priority number 3, was the parking lot resurface, the library, the immediate front area, and that's approximately 300,000. Priority number 4 was the re-roofing of the city buildings. Is a total of 430,000, and those identified city buildings that were identified are the Conrad Harrison Youth Center, which needs immediate attention, City Hall, the Community Center / Adult Center, Fire Department Station Number 1, the El Centro Business Incubator, and the Police Department. So those were all prioritized within the group of number 4. Priority number 5, the re-roofing of the Valley Center Point Library and surrounding areas. This was approximately 50,000, and this is just to stabilize for 3 years. Okay. The rest of the projects were not given a priority, but I have provided a slide for you as far as the other projects are the Imperial Avenue extension. So this slide provides you with the phases, how much it's gonna cost. For example, in phase 1, it's from Interstate 8 to Wake Avenue, highlighted in red. And approximately, this would be $1 million for construction, and in the year 2020, approximately. So this would actually take it from Wake Avenue, from Imperial to Cypress. In phase number 2 would be Wake Avenue to Dannenberg, and this is $2 million for construction, approximately in the fiscal year 21. Phase 3 would be approximately 3.7 million, and this would be for utilities and constructions, phased out in year 22, taken from Dannenberg to Manuel Ortiz Avenue. And the next phase, which is Manuel Ortiz to Valley View, that's existing already, so we wouldn't be doing anything there. And phase 4, that would be developer-driven. We don't have the numbers. That would be from Valley View Avenue to McCabe Road. Estimated grand total for all 4 phases would be 15 million.
But that's not including phase 4? So that's just phase 1 through 3?
Not including phase 4, because yes, that's correct. It's developer-driven.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick question? So the
I'm
public
sorry.
work projects, I have a similar question that I asked earlier, and that is, did you have a laundry list of, 1,000 projects that you considered, and you whittled it down to this priority list?
Absolutely, and I wanted to give praise actually to the team, because a couple of different things. Number one, it was a huge list.
Right.
And then we actually kind of vetted out grant opportunities, or where there is grant opportunities. So the list that you're looking at now is a fully vetted list of monies that are not available through grant opportunities, that are not available through, APC or PM10 type of scenarios. These types of projects would clearly come from the general fund, and it involved a lot of deferred maintenance as well. Furthermore, when you look at some of these phases, we, especially with the Imperial Avenue heading south, Abraham and the team is really trying to get some shovel-ready projects. So when the funding does come, they're shovel-ready, and we clearly have the talent to write the grant and to go after the grant, but the key is to get these projects shovel-ready. And that's why you're seeing, the $15 million. But again, those projects would be ready, the engineering, the utility, everything would be there. So when the money came, we would even strengthen our position to get the grant. It's not as sexy maybe as the other projects, but from a strategic standpoint, it does get us ready for those types of projects. So everything you're looking at here is completely vetted. There's no other outside money that we can chase. It would come from general fund in the future. So.
And Abraham, I guess the SB1 funding has already been taken into consideration as to what we're going to be able to use the additional gas tax revenue on?
Yes, so before I go to SB1, just to clarify this, the funding, the phase one, you see it's a little lower at 1 million. That's because we've already been successful in getting some grant funding, and we're leveraging against that and other projects. Phase two is more expensive, and part of it is because we have less funding for that area, but we do have some identified already. So between phase one and phase two, we're already using street impact fees that we've been collecting over the years. We're using the LTA, and we're using grant funding, we're leveraging as much as we can. Where we get in a little bit in trouble is phase three, because we can't really ask a developer that's fronting that project to do it, because the city water plant is fronting the project. So it's not a developer-driven project. Plus, that's the section that has the most utilities and has a canal and power to be underground. So that's part of the high cost for that section. The existing area between Manuel Ortiz and Valley View is fine. And phase four, we could just it can be part of the developers who pay for it. Now, we're obviously always looking for grant funding. SB1 is now with SB1 we have that option, but as you know, our payment management system is already, even including SB1, we're short by 750,000, which is another ongoing request that's presented here. So yes, we can move, instead of using Measure P, use LTA or SB1 towards this. It's just a trade-off, whether it goes here or to other city streets throughout town.
But if I may, Councilmember Jackson, but what I heard though, Mr. Campos, is that this would definitely, the funding for these projects would have a direct impact on general fund though, right? The monies would have to come from general fund as opposed to any other grant funding opportunities.
There is, if there's not enough, it could potentially impact the general fund, but I think we could find LTA or SB1 funding and grant to some extent. Again, there's unless we get something like a Tiger grant, which are impossible to get.
The tiger?
It's a tiger.
They should call
What
them
about kitty cat or something?
No, it's a tiger.
White tiger?
And I know the region's been trying to apply, and we tried to apply for this project for the past like at least 3 times and unsuccessful. I don't think anybody in the region's been successful, not even for the board project, for the crossing international border projects. But anyhow, so we can take it as far as phase 3, and we can start leveraging some SB1 and LTA, but it's just our PCI is gonna start going down. It's just it's a trade.
So my question, Abraham, and again, I go back to the present day dollars as opposed to, because some of these projects are going out to 2022. What I don't want to see is, we're estimating right now 3 phases at 15 million, but if we're not taking consideration just the rise in construction costs in 2021, 2022, and we have a $5 million shortfall in 2022, I just want to be prepared that we're looking at those numbers and that we're estimating correctly on the high side, knowing that everything's going to go much higher in years to come.
Yeah, and it's present dollars, and hopefully we get additional revenues as we move forward, even on this measure, to help offset some of it. But it's present dollars. Hopefully the LTA goes up on just a Measure D fund, but we shall see. And it's measured as present dollars.
Right, let's, if you could continue, please.
So some of the projects were not prioritized, and I want to go ahead and highlight those. They are within your spreadsheet, right there. Some of those that were not prioritized but stayed on the list, were not removed, are the shade structure for the public works yard. Approximate cost would be $300,000.
Is that, okay, let me see. Oh, that's about mid-page.
That's mid-page, right above
Got it.
Item number 4.
Got it?
Priority
okay.
4, all right. So right below priority number 5, we've got the Parks Maintenance Facility Shop, approximately 3.6 million. Parking lot resurface, Valley Center Point, the front area, 375,000. Parking lot resurface, Valley Center Point rear, mid to long term, approximately 300,000. And one more, all the way down to the bottom, we've got the Public Works median improvements, 4th Street and Adams Avenue, 1.8 million. I did provide a slide for you of what it's, the existing medians and what they look like, and of course, the proposed, what they would potentially look like if we were to move forward with this item. And in keeping with, of course, our city beautification, this would align with our projects.
Can we do the beautification even though we don't own the roadway? Or do we have to wait for Caltrans to give it to us? And I thought we had already told Caltrans we don't want it until it's looking beautiful.
We can, under an encroachment permit process, we can go through that. It'd be
Okay.
probably slightly more expensive to go through it right now before the relinquishment, but it can be done.
But, I mean, Caltrans' ultimate plan is to give that to us, right? To sign
Yes.
it over to us? And I
Yes.
think we've told them, we don't want it until it's looking nice and we don't have to spend $1 gazillion
Well,
out of the box.
they'll give it to us,
With some-
beautification wouldn't be covered. But it would be maybe ADA, that would be discussion points with Caltrans,
Okay.
whether they participate with us or not. That's
Yeah.
the discussion that we need to have with them.
Yeah,
But I highly doubt that the beautification would be a component.
yeah. We'll see if they do a better job with that than with the signage and dogwood.
Is that something we can maybe get a working group to start, maybe 2 members of the council start working with Caltrans? Because it seems like we've been talking about that for 4 or 5
How
years
about
now.
if I take it back to ICTC?
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay.
And then Marcella, you can bring it up in the city managers meeting with ICTC group. I'll bring it up with Caltrans directly at the ICTC meeting and report back, okay? All right,
So that completes the list of the recommended projects and projects that were not prioritized.
okay.
As part of the ongoing expenses, again, the city pavement maintenance, $750,000, and this would be considered during the budget process, the regular budget process. Now, the following projects were removed within the category for the Public Works Group for the reasons that I'll indicate. Parking lot resurface, Fire Station Number 1, $40,000, to be considered during the next budget process, excuse me. The re-roofing of the old post office pavilion, approximately $50,000, same reason, to be considered at a future budget process. The re-roofing of the Economic Development Department building, approximately $70,000, to be considered during a future budget process. The re-roofing of Fire Station Number 3, approximately $85,000, to be considered during a future budget process.
Why would we need to do that at all? I mean, didn't we just build that thing? I mean, it hasn't been
This is
open
co-
that long.
Well, approximately because of the time span that the roofing, it's 10 years out, but we need to consider that in 10 years, we might have to, yeah.
Planning ahead.
We're planning ahead, yeah.
Man, I hope it lasts longer than that.
Another project that was taken out, signal light on Imperial Avenue and Pepper Drive, approximate cost would be $325,000, and that is just considered for future consideration. Street lighting on Broadway Avenue was also taken out, approximately $700,000, to be considered with some future funding sources, that we'll have to look for funding sources. And lastly, the re-roofing of the wastewater treatment plant, approximately $35,000, to be considered during a future budget process.
So Liz, in paren, when it says 0 to 2 years, does that mean we need to
That's
take
the
care of it
lifespan.
within the next?
Yes, that's the
okay.
lifespan, yes.
So, like, when I look at the police department, $70,000, but if we decide we're going to totally redo the police department, then we wouldn't be spending
wouldn't be
70 grand
spending-
on
correct.
the roof. Okay, all right,
Correct.
all righty, what else?
So, in terms of priority, I listed the priorities and gave you those priorities. And in summarizing, all the 4 groups, approximate total project cost is $72.9 million. Just from Measure P ongoing revenues, approximately is $5.7 million. Construction cost would be 1.7 million, and potentially Measure P bond money, approximately 66 million. And that is a total of all the 4 groups with the items that I have presented in front of you.
Excellent, 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 thank you. Okay, so what I'd like to do is take, think what we're gonna do I have more speaker slips from the public? Right now, I've got 2. And I think what I'd like to do is to continue to compartmentalize each of the working groups. So if you're a member of the public and have given me a speaker slip, so maybe David Hutchison, Rich Ryan, Rosario Velarde, and Todd Evangelist, if we can wait until we get to that working group, and that way we'll just kind of keep it simple in my little brain for what we're doing. So what I'd like to do, gentlemen, if we're okay, is let's just dig in here. We'll start with the ADA IT projects. If we can pull up the detail on that. Is it, I know the detail is part of the agenda packet, but is it also part of this? Okay. Yeah,
You talking about the projects?
yes, so project 1, so if you look at this right here on what was handed out. And Chris, I'm gonna need help with this. Are you ready? So I'm just going to summarize that I felt that the IT group felt very strongly that we needed to move forward with projects 1, 2, and 3, which are what I'm going to categorize as IT-related, because there's been a significant period of time before we've done any major across-the-board upgrades with regard to our IT infrastructure. We're at end of life with a lot of stuff. We have cybersecurity threats that we need to deal with. We have a lot of old licenses that we need to have upgraded. And Chris, what else am I missing as to why we are advocating for projects 1, 2, and 3 from an IT perspective?
Well, project 3 is going to cover our library and the problems that we're having with the hardware at the library. And this also includes new desks and chairs that we spoke about at that one council meeting, that one of the problems were the dividers. This would cover replacement of chairs and desks. That's what we had talked about. And this is a complete project. The other projects you've hit on really well. We are at end of life on most of our hardware. To add any kind of warranty would incur quite a bit of unnecessary cost rather than replacement. And licenses actually cover safety. And since you did mention cybersecurity, that Trends appliance that is listed in project number 2 is something that's an application control that would be in addition to our antivirus that we currently run. And that would limit our users to what they can and cannot install.
The other thing I wanted to point out, and Chris helped me with this, under project number 2, there's a couple of Munis modules, because I think that one of the recurring themes is we have got to be able to work quicker, smarter, and more efficiently. The HR module, will that allow us, what are some of the features with the HR module, Chris or Terry?
Well, from what I understand about the HR module, it will allow the W-4s to be done by the employees.
Okay, so a lot more user-friendly,
The
self-service.
insurance, yeah. Well,
Okay.
that's what we see. We have the billing self-service side of Munis right now. This is
Right.
going to be the employee self-service.
Excellent.
So maybe to sum it up better than to try to list off things,
Right.
this would be an employee self-service.
Excellent. And then with regard to the Parks and Recreation module, I understand that will be improvements to being able to, like, sign up for your classes, sign up for summer programs.
Yes.
Make reservations, and so really.
Pay fees too.
Right, so that's really a customer service upgrade.
Well, and the benefit of this is that we already run Munis. And this
Right.
is just a module of Munis, so there's no question of whether or not it's going to work with what we currently have. It is in addition to what we currently have.
And remind the council how many people in our huge IT staff, we have you and,
Mike Benaga, So there's two of us right now. We have, we're
Yeah.
in need of,
And we really did ask Chris to sharpen his pencil when we asked about the servers and making sure that this is exactly the equipment that we need. We asked you to research whether lease or purchase made the most sense. And so the IT group is really coming forward with a strong recommendation that we fund projects 1, 2, and 3. And we have the cash in the bank already to do that. So I'm not asking for a decision now, but I really want to make sure that council understands that we feel that this is pretty critical for safety as well as customer service considerations and other things that we know that we've had to deal with lately.
You know, go ahead.
Chris, I do remember having the discussion. In fact, I think I even brought it up about the reconforming of the desks and the chairs because of some of the issues that we were having with usage that was unacceptable. My only concern is the $18,000+ price tag with us right in the middle or in the beginning stages of well, we completed the library study, but we're moving forward with that project as a whole and buying something that maybe isn't compatible to the overall aesthetics of what a new library would be. And that's my only question with that is if we buy something right now.
We will make sure it goes with the new decor. We
well,
promise.
that's a
think
good
that's-
question.
yeah.
Because currently, and I had Mike Reed, the supervisor of the maintenance department, go look at the library because the initial thought was, let's just remove the partitions. Unfortunately, it's all one piece.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you would have to take a saw and just cut it all down, and that would,
Mike loves using saws.
Yeah, but you know what, I just want to point out that that's exactly the kind of thinking that the council has, which is, if we're going to spend a dime now, we better be able to use it in the future.
Yeah.
So to the extent we move forward with $18,484, we darn well better be able to use it in the new library.
and they come,
Okay.
and yes, these are single desks that can be either put together in a row or separately, or, I mean, there were several recommendations that I had, and this was between Mr. Banks and Marcella, they would prefer this particular model. So this is a price tag, and we don't have to go with this particular model, but this is what a cost would be.
And like Cheryl says, my only concern is that we're gonna be able to move that equipment from the existing facility to the new facility and that all furniture will match and we won't be saying, well, we're gonna throw that stuff out and buy another $20,000 worth of matching desks with everything else.
No.
That's my only concern.
And I think that the other thing is, we are really buying, we're not looking at going to Lexus model on everything or Tesla model on everything. We're buying good, solid stuff that we know is gonna last at a good price. And I think, Chris, that we asked you to compare and contrast and, go out and consult with some of your peers, and you did that
I
as
did.
well?
Yep.
We really
I
put you
went
through your
out to
paces.
the ICOE, especially with the ICOE, talked with Luis Wong, got a lot of good recommendations from him.
I know that, speaking to the furniture purchase, and, we had a meeting with our seniors earlier this week, and I know that, in any purchase that we make regarding our seniors, that be ADA friendly. I know that they had mentioned that some of the chairs are sometimes hard to get out of because they don't have the support handles. So I'm assuming that any purchasing of chairs would be friendly to senior community as well. Are we looking and taking that into consideration?
I did not take that into consideration. I went to the library store, which we purchase all of our library furniture from. I don't think we've,
Let's make a note of that and make sure that
That's
it's multi-purpose, multi-use, and can move to the new facility.
that's good.
Thank
Okay,
you.
perfect.
I'd like to make a comment if I can. I had and still have some difficulty with this category. Not because I'm minimizing the needs or in any way disputing the needs that you have mentioned, because I believe that they're real. But for myself, when I looked at Measure P funding and what we're going to use it, and we asked our citizens to voluntarily increase their sales tax for things and projects that I thought would have an immediate and tangible benefit to our citizens. And I try to separate what I call operational costs, things that are needed in the city by virtue of operation, and things that we would have considered funding either in the near future or in the long future if we didn't have Measure P, right? Because I hate for us to say, okay, well, we got Measure P money, let's go ahead and buy it, right? Whereas if we didn't have Measure P, we would have planned for that in some way in the near future. And in some way supplanting our city general fund. So I like, my difficulty with this, again, is that I don't dispute the need, but, personally, I'm not sure that that's really consistent with our intent in Measure P and providing a direct benefit to our citizens. And so that's really the difficulty that I'm having, in that I would like to kind of concentrate on things that would be above and beyond things that we would have considered on a yearly basis as part of our operation.
And I appreciate your comments. And I think I look at the ballot language, and it talks about to maintain general city services. And in listening to Chris describe the dire need of our current IT infrastructure, it worries me. If you want to talk about things that keep me awake at night, it's listening to end-of-life discussions about our IT infrastructure. And quite frankly, if we had been budgeting to replace all of this, we should have been doing it for
Right.
quite a while. I mean, we are how many versions back with regard to some of our licenses?
At least two.
At least
Okay.
two
The office
upgrades.
licenses were about 4.
Yeah. And so we know what a challenge it is for us to meet our budget and have a balanced budget every year. And I think one of the areas, unfortunately, where we have really cut back and not been as vigilant and as diligent is in the area of IT.
Right.
And
No,
so
and I get it. And
Yeah.
like I said,
Yeah.
I didn't want my comments to in any way dispute the need for these
Right.
things, because I think
Yeah.
they're really needed.
Yeah.
But again, I just go back to what I perceive was the basic intent of Measure
Right.
P.
And I think that Ephraim, I would probably have more of a pause if we were talking about $5 million as opposed to 500,000, which in my mind is like flipping a switch and immediately having, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Flipping a switch and immediately having all of this brought up to where it needs to be,
That's right.
yeah?
Safety, security,
All of that.
and then it benefits not just me. This doesn't benefit me necessarily, but it's going to benefit the whole city. Every department is going to see benefit from this.
Well, and if we look at operational efficiencies, customer service efficiencies, those types of things, that really, again, is part of the selling point for me. The last component of this, I think, is in Frank's area, the ADA. Okay, could you please come up, Frank, for just a second? And the reason that transitional plan ADA is a priority project number 4, can you talk a little bit about what we are mandated to do, the cost of the project, and then how we actually get some assistance in paying for it if we go forward now?
Okay, yes, every city is supposed to have an ADA transition plan. I think it was implemented back in 1999 or something like that. And any city who does not have the plan in place can risk losing any funding, federal funding, and grants. Additionally, excuse me for a minute. I lost my.
The JPIA, can you touch on, I think the JPIA is willing to help jurisdictions fund the cost
Yes,
for the transit, for the
yes,
plan.
they do, actually. The total cost of the proposal from DAC, which is, what is it called, Disabled Access, is $216,900. JPIA will provide assistant funding in the amount of $21,500, which will reduce the city's cost to roughly $195,400.
And we haven't had our ADA plan updated for Do you remember how many years?
You know what? I know that there was a lot of work done, a lot of things were upgraded, but nobody kept records of it.
Yeah.
According to our existing ADA transition plan, most of the things that were listed on the plan were supposed to have been done by no later than 2006. We are now in 2018. So,
And I think Betsy, city attorney, traditionally, when you're dealing with ADA issues, it's, if you're making headway, if you're making progress, good efforts, and that's what concerns me, that if foundationally what we're looking to do is improvements with city facilities, we darn well better make sure that we're ADA compliant. Now, some of our newer facilities, we're not going to have to go through the exercise because, or there'll be a reduced cost because we assume that they were constructed.
yeah, I asked if there was going to be a reduction in cost because a lot of those projects have already been upgraded.
Right.
Or they were new
Right.
and built up to the previous current codes.
Right.
But JPIA and the consultant strongly recommended that every facility be included because there's always a possibility that an ADA issue was overlooked or the codes have changed again. So we always have to be making sure that we're upgrading all our facilities.
And I think that as part of our committee discussion, what we said is we'd get the transitional plan done.
Mhm.
And then, similar to our, like our pavement plan and other plans, we would identify projects for funding into the future. And that would not come from Measure P funding, that could then maybe transition general fund or somewhere else. So,
If I may add, the existing transition plan did not include public sidewalks. This plan will include it.
Oh.
It did not include bus stops and bus post stops. This plan will include it. It also did not include parking lots, which this plan is going to include.
excellent.
So.
Okay. All right. Frank, thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back to any member of the ADA IT Project Committee. Are there any other comments?
Nope, I'm good.
Any other questions from council before we move on? Are there any members of the public that wanted to comment on the ADA IT project component? Okay. So you know where we stand then from your working group with regard to that? Okay, so the next category was Parks and Recreation, and I would hope that maybe Edgard or Efrain, if you could walk us through what you want us to know about your project list.
Well, I think that, as I indicated earlier, we followed the guidance that we were given in terms of what are the immediate safety concerns, and from what we were told is that the replacement of those parks, of the lighting of the parks is not, is urgent, and
Okay.
it is a matter of safety for our citizens. Buckland Park, I know that you guys get the calls that we all get in terms of our community and the desire to have, Buckland Park, the jewel that it used to be, and so we felt that from a community perspective, that's something that the community will really benefit from. Our restrooms are in dire need of renovation, and if you've been to some of them, you would appreciate the scope of the problem here. McGee Park, I think there's a high level of confidence that we are going to get some grant funding, but as it was indicated, it's going to require some matching dollars, and it's a mechanism to maximize the renovation there, as well as Carlos Aguilar Park. The other, we also talked about our aquatic center, and our aquatic center is going to require some additional personnel. I think that's just the nature of the project and the magnitude of the project, and I had initially kind of balked at the idea of using Measure P money for personnel costs. But I think in retrospect, as I look at things, I'm convinced myself that that's something that we do need to incorporate in our operation, because our new facilities, if we're going to keep them up, maintain them in the way that they should be maintained, that would require some additional personnel. And so we allocated that as well, as well as our parks. There's a lot more needs. I think this is one of those areas in which we see a tremendous additional need to satisfy our community. I think the project that ICOE has in mind, that they're requesting us to partner with, has, merits some discussion from the council if we want to allocate some additional funding at a Measure P for that. And so we brought it to you in this way, I think, to allow the five of us to hear the information and to ask comments and find out where where the other projects would fall in terms of council priorities.
So I just want to review, and if we're looking at this spreadsheet, I appreciate, because this was going to be my question, is the start date. So in terms of what you'd like to do is move forward with the design and environmental. So that would be essentially the study for the field lighting? Is that, what's encompassed there?
I'll let staff, what's the timing on that, the lighting, Chris?
So, Mr. Legakis, we have all-in project costs of $3.6 million, but there's a $272,000 component. Is that what we're moving out the door in January, or?
That would be design,
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
engineering.
And then we would start like a phased construction in September of
Soon
2019?
as possible, yes.
Okay. And is that one of those projects where we could do all of the lighting at, at one time?
We can knock them out pretty fast, once we get started, yeah.
Okay. So if we're looking at, because I'm trying to break this up year by year, so what we're looking at getting out of the gate right now is the $272,000,
Yes.
right? Okay. And then,
And Chris, can you share with the council what you shared with us when we met, as far as the urgency and the really, this becoming a safety issue?
Sure. Most of these lights are probably 40 years old. The poles may be even older. Last year, we had a pole come down at Swarthout Park. Thank gosh, we didn't have any kids out there, nobody was there, but that can happen with these winds we have anytime. We can upgrade the individual lights, but they're not going to be near up to the standards that everybody expects anymore. And I think that what we're looking at doing is, if you see Sunflower Park or the new lighting at Aguilar Park, that's what we propose to put in all these fields. They would all be automatic set, no more manual setting. I would do it from a computer. They could be
nice.
shut off. If I get word that nobody's there, I could shut them off from my computer. They'll have a 30-year warranty. Anytime the lights are out, Muscal will come out and relamp them.
So again, and one of the things I keep thinking about is some of the offsetting costs, right, in terms of staff time with the ADA stuff that we were talking about. I think that's just foundational, but the IT improvements should make everything run a lot more efficiently. So
This will
that's
do the
really
same
good
for
news.
us. Yes.
Okay. So that was that. Then the Buckland renovations, design and environmental. Mr. Legascus, what specifically are we looking at there? Is that the restroom, the Ramada?
Well,
or
initially, it would be the pavilion,
The pavilion, okay.
and that would be demoed. It would have to be checked for asbestos and all that stuff first. It would be demoed along with the south parking lot, south restroom by the south parking lot off of Aurora. Neither of those facilities are ADA compliant.
Okay.
We
Well, then we
have,
should take them down before Frank gets his funding for the study.
The other exciting component of the Buckland Park renovation is, I thought it was exciting, is the setting up a stage area with the modern infrastructure to be able to hold events there.
well, the proposal would actually be an amphitheater
Right.
where the existing pavilion is, which would include restrooms, ADA-compliant restrooms, an electrical room to power the lights, and maybe concerts in the park. And my vision is a cement flooring where we could pull our stage in, set it up. When that's not needed, take it out. They could use the deal for dance groups and what have you.
So, speaking of Buckland, so I was there over the weekend and noticed we've got a boatload of dead trees there. This isn't part of Measure P or anything else, but there is a plan to get those down and replaced.
It's an never-ending process. We've taken 2 off of the northeast hill in the last 30 days.
Yeah, okay. Okay, and then the design environmental for the restroom, snack bar, another 84,000 that we'd like to see now. McGee Park, fingers crossed that we have something come out. And then in July, you'd like to take a look at design and environmental for the new parking lot at Carlos Aguilar. So good timing on that.
Now, you know where that parking lot is proposed to be, correct?
Help me, is
It's
it
on
off
the-
of Pico?
It's on the south side where IID underground that ditch.
Oh, okay.
That's one of our problems with, that Abraham pointed out. There's no existing traffic. It was a ditch,
Oh, right, yep,
yeah.
okay.
Madam Mayor, this one, maybe Chris, and I just wanted to, Mr. Legakis, I wanted to kind of, share the concept. So, I really like the concept of getting these projects shovel-ready and the ability to pay for the design of all these projects, that total $660,000, in my mind, tells me that we can get them shovel-ready in the event that that park bond would pass, and then we can maybe dip into that. Is the recommendation today to use ongoing revenues from Measure P to pay for the designs of these projects, and then maybe propose or bond money to fulfill these projects? Or what would be the recommendation from this working group today? Is it the 660,000 that we're looking to get in these things shovel-ready? Or what would ultimately be the recommendation?
Efrain?
So we didn't get to that level of detail, Mr. Cardenas, but I think that's a great idea. I think that the idea of proceeding with the design out of existing Measure P funds,
Yeah.
that makes sense. I think that would be a terrific idea.
Because and again, I'm gonna self-disclose, but I would be very supportive of getting those designs ready. And then if that park bond hits, I think that would really put us in the front running for, being park poor and a desert community to tackle these projects because they are shovel-ready. And the fact that it's only, it's still, quite a bit of money, but it's attainable and reachable.
But I want to put something in perspective here. If we add the 660 here, just to get everything shovel-ready, plus the other projects that we've talked about so far with IT and
Right.
ADA, we're at only about 1.4 million, and we're sitting on 3.1 million in the bank right now.
Okay.
So far, we're.
We haven't got to
looking
Public
pretty
Works
good.
yet.
We're getting to Public Works. Okay, so, and Aquatic Center, we're looking at an opening, unfortunately, 2019.
Yeah, well, I was going to mention that we have our bid opening on February the 22nd, so we'll know what our bids come in at. From what we know, construction costs are rising, so we're very, very curious to see what, that cost is going to be for that bid. And of course, we do the bid opening on the 22nd, about 30 days to review those bids and bring it back to you for award. So hopefully groundbreaking, maybe March,
Okay.
April.
Okay, so let's call this Phase 1 of the Parks and Recreation Project Group at $660,000 is what you're proposing to put out there right away? Okay? I think we do have some folks maybe in the audience that wanted to address the Parks and Recreation Project aspect of this. Mr. Evangelist, was this part of what?
He was.
Okay. And then we'll have you come forward, please, and then Ms. Velarde. And Mr. Ryan, was yours?
He just stepped out.
Okay, I bet he used the library, maybe. And then Mr. Hutchison? Was yours also Parks and Recreation related? Your, were your comments going to be about Parks and Recreation?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, yes, thank you. Okay. Okay. All right, Mr. Evangelist.
Thank you, Mayor Vegas Walker and council members, city manager and staff here. I want to pass along a hello from Dr. Fennell. Couldn't make it here tonight, unfortunately, had a conflict tonight, but we certainly appreciate the efforts that the city has done, city staff has done, what you have done last couple of months. We think you're going about it the right way, where you're analyzing the costs and looking at what you might have to put towards those costs. I'm personally encouraged. 72 or 73 million is down. I think the last time we were here was 80 million. So I think I know that's big numbers, but I think it's doable. I think I'm more encouraged than I am less encouraged about when I see those numbers personally. I certainly would want to speak real quick and briefly about the concept of the Monte Vista Regional Soccer and Wellness Park, which is on a full parcel of land of 80 acres that's due west of the Imperial County Office of Education office, located at Sperber Road and McCabe Road, and will eventually be the corner of Imperial Avenue extension as well. That 80-acre parcel is being annexed into the city, and I'm not currently up to date on that particular status. City staff would probably know that as well, but our intent in the application is that 80-acre parcel would be a part of the city, and then qualify for city park space. We believe that concept is consistent with the Measure P wording of being a major capital needs for the city of El Centro. It actually would expand the park space in the city of El Centro by 63 acres. That the day that it's built would be the largest park in the city of El Centro. We think, we're glad to think of it as a truly capital project. This isn't something that would have ongoing associated costs. It would be our commitment to manage the ongoing costs and operation and maintenance of the facility. So for the city's perspective, it would strictly be a capital project without any ongoing impact to city budget. I mentioned, we talked about the cost. For that 63 acres, we've put it out per acre. That's our cost. We assume to build it out and to its full completion would be $238,000 per acre. That's $15 million as a big piece. So when you start thinking of park space and buying it and doing whatever you would need to make it a park at $238,000 per acre, we feel that that's the most competitive that we can do as a community. The other concept is that it is ready to go. It would certainly be ready within the bonding language of 3 years. We'd like to think it'd be done within months versus 3 years. Certainly one of the most shovel-ready projects you would have put before you. Another thing that is unique about this particular project is that we feel it actually has an economic value to the city. We're doing it for the kids, we're doing it for our community, but part of our community is economic advancement as well, and this particular concept of a park would rely on the industry of youth sports, and if we build out the park the way we're envisioning, we envision on an average weekend that we would draw about 100 teams to play in a given tournament for a couple days in the city of El Centro. Some would be local, but a majority of those teams would be out of town. So when we did our analysis of that, we expect 4,000 out-of-town visitors for a weekend, and our hope is that equate to about 1,000 tanks of gas or 24,000 meals and 1,500 hotel night stays in the city of El Centro. And we can do that over a particular week, and we envision for our project to work with a business plan associated with it, that we would do that 4 times a year, but we could certainly do it more times if needed. Every time we would do that, we would think that would positively impact the community of El Centro. We're glad to think that it maximizes our local resources. because the land is there, the land is purchased, that wouldn't be a cost of anything. Anything else would have to go and purchase land. I mentioned that it would be the largest park in the city of El Centro, and we envision it to be more than just a soccer complex. The nice thing about soccer, one of the reasons we chose it, is that essentially it's just grassy fields with lighting associated with it. There's not a lot of fencing or baseball diamonds that would kind of chop it all up. So it could serve as a soccer facility for kids on a given event, but then the next day, if we turn it over and have a concert or a festival that would happen there, we'd have all the existing structure of bathrooms and parking and facilities to accommodate festivals or concerts for large-scale community events for the city of El Centro. We do have, as part of it, we had, I think in some of these other park build-outs, you had mentioned the concept of restrooms and snack bars. We actually envision a field house, which is a major part of the cost. When we say $15 million, a lot of that will be put into a very large, we haven't necessarily gotten details on the drawings on that or square footage of it, all based on funding. But we estimate probably $7 million of that would go towards a large field house that would house things like restrooms, locker rooms, equipment rooms, workout rooms, snack bar, prep kitchens, and it would be a two-story facility where the top facility would be large conference spaces for the community as well. We believe that this location is positioned perfectly for the growth of the city of El Centro. It's tough for the city of El Centro to grow in many other areas, but south is certainly the place, and it is directly south. In fact, in the minutes I was looking, or the agenda earlier, is directly south of the Linda Vista project that's happening. Can't imagine 230 homes being bought by people with a park right across the street from them that they could utilize. We think that would be an added benefit for any future developments. And we are certainly open to sharing land. While we think of the whole parcel is 80 acres, the park space would only be 63 of those acres. So there's other, we're actually building, the need for our annexation right now is that we're building an additional administrative building for ICOE on this particular parcel in the northern east corner of it. But there's another parcel of land that would be available, and we, at our last council meeting that we attended, we certainly made that available. If I think you have plans for a library, and that's great news. But if you need plans for other things, whether it be a police station or even a maintenance yard for Parks and Rec, while we not necessarily envision the city having to use Parks and Rec to maintain it, we have the space for a yard if that would be the best place for it. We thought that anytime we have a park and there's a police station by it, makes everybody feel really good about being in a park. So we would certainly welcome having a police station near. Sheriff station obviously is fairly close as well. That may be a convenience. I guess in closing, I'd want to just make sure to reiterate that there's not going to be in our plan an ongoing cost to the city. So no additional city staff that you'd have to pay on an annual basis, no additional maintenance, no additional capital outlays in the future, just simply the value of having the additional park space in the city. And it's our hope that this complex would create a venue that would provide a destination venue for not just our area region of Imperial County, but for our region in the Southwest United States. I think we're perfectly located between Phoenix and San Diego and Los Angeles areas to draw weekend tournaments of those students. And we think that this would be a perfect location. So thank you for your time, and I certainly am available for questions if anybody would have questions.
Mayor, if I may
Yes.
start.
Please.
Again, it's, this is an exciting project, and, the fact that it's not only, exciting, it's strategic, and I'm just curious, Madam Mayor, how we can move forward. And I know we've been discussing it, and I really want to move forward from concept to actually terms and conditions. Because I know you provide great narrative, and there's obviously a lot of great points to this situation, to this relationship. But, and maybe I'll go back to our mayor and staff, is, how do we move forward from concept to actually maybe developing some terms and conditions and feasibility to seeing if this relationship or this asset can work? Because, I see 63 acres that we can access and enhance our parks. We own 73% of the hotel, 73% of the hotel inventory is in our city. That probably goes for the same for our restaurants. So it would be a great fit. But again, we've been at a concept level, and but in fairness to the city and to our residents and their money, we probably need to get into the feasibility of it. So again, I would probably come back to staff and come back to our mayor to see if this is an opportunity where we can explore the feasibility of it and say, okay, we have access to 63 acres of park. We're not gonna have to pay for the maintenance. We need to discuss use, we need to discuss other terms and conditions, but, it sounds very good.
It's fantastic, and I know we've had the opportunity to meet on site with ICOE.
Right.
And I think that probably what we need to do is just continue with those discussions.
We'd welcome
Because
that,
we
yeah,
need, we
certainly.
need to get some meat on the bones before we can decide what's gonna be feasible. I think tonight, one of the things that I kind of see us coming up with are things that we can start moving through the pipeline and getting in play right away. I think that the ICOE El Centro complex is one of those things that still, we need to kind of figure out a little bit what that's gonna look like. It's the same as with what we can do or should do with regard to our homeless initiatives, as well as our animal shelter needs. Those aren't quite as fully defined. And so I think that what we need to do is figure out when we can next maybe have that discussion as to what would an MOU look like? What do the dollars look like? What is ICOE? I know you're already got the land, but what's the thought behind coming up with the rest of the cash to build out the complex and that sort of thing? So I think next steps would probably be another meeting down at ICOE.
Yeah, we certainly welcome that. I think
Okay.
we would be able to pick that up. A lot of it does relate to commitments and
Right.
who's ready to do this and that. Then,
Right.
After those commitments are known,
Right.
then progress could be made to that point until the next
Absolutely. So,
level
yeah.
of commitment.
So I think, to your point, Alex, it's in the pipeline, it's something under consideration, but I think kind of like what I showed today, we've had a lot of things that have been in the pipeline a lot longer that we're just ready to move on. But this is an outstanding project that warrants us continuing down that path. So let's see when we can next get on the calendar and start with those discussions again, okay? And is everybody comfortable if Alex and I continue with the ICOE meetings? Or is there anybody else that wants to
No,
jump in?
that'll be okay. I think that's a great idea. I think, soon though, however, I don't know that we can drag this discussion
Oh, no.
very long,
No.
because I think, how much is the city willing to invest in this project is gonna have to be a question that's gonna have to be answered fairly soon, I suppose, before we proceed.
Well, certainly for us, in order to proceed, we would have to know, yeah, certainly. And then I think I would just reiterate that the timing of this project is simply dependent upon funding, because I think we would be ready to go tomorrow if we had that funding.
Okay.
So if there's a concern about what would be able to enhance the city's development of using bonding funds within 3 years, we would certainly be, available to meet that timeline like none other, so.
Yeah. And again, the feasibility study that says the ongoing maintenance costs will be met by having 4 soccer tournaments a year that generates this kind of revenue. Because remember, when I think about things like that, yep, that's great, pours a lot of money into our economy, but it doesn't necessarily translate into tax dollars that come to us, right? Because our largest tax base is sales tax. So we get a little bit off of food, not a lot, a little bit off of TOT,
TOT.
not a lot. I mean, we love having people here, love the whole idea of, it being a destination. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that it still pays for itself.
So maybe they can buy a car while they're in town. There you go.
Or go shopping at the mall. We love it.
there you go.
Perfect. All right. Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And we'll get together and match up calendars, okay? Ms. Velarde, is this a good time for you to speak? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rosario Velarde, and honorable members of the council. The group SOS Senior Organizing and Services are making the following petition for senior citizen attending and participating at the El Centro Adult Center. Number 1, we ask for a subsidize in the amount of $10,000 to pay for wellness class such as Zumba, Tai Chi, and yoga for the year 2018. These classes help the health and wellness for senior citizens. Number 2, we ask for a subsidize in the amounts of $5,000 for cultural tours, which we plan on going twice a year. Number 3, we ask for subsidies in the amount for $3,000 for classes such as crochet and jewels class. Number 4, we ask for appropriate chair be purchased for senior with disability at the El Centro Adult Center. This prevents future accidents at the adult center. Number 5, we ask for an extension of the hours at the adult center from 9 a.m. 5 p.m. The current hours of operation at the adult center are from 9 a.m. 3 p.m., which at 3 p.m. is the peak hours for hot weather in the summer. And I once remember in the measure P include the seniors too. And well, it's all for today, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Velarde. Mr. Hutchison, did you have anything to add to that, or you're just championing that cause?
I just have a couple of comments on a
Okay.
couple of the items. Okay, I'm fully supportive of the items that Rosario just presented. But I'd like to add a couple of comments on a couple of them. On the classes that are paid for, I noticed we received a small grant last year where they paid for some of our classes. Now, during that, I'm not familiar with all the classes, but the Zumba and Tai Chi classes, I noticed had a lot more participants during that particular month. But it dropped back to pretty much the people that were before at the end of the month. So it's my feeling that there are some people that maybe cannot afford the classes that would be very helpful if you would subsidize some of the costs. Okay, on item number 5, which is the extension of the, okay, extension of the hours. I've attended a couple other senior centers, and the normal hours that I've found have usually been from 9 to 5 or 6, or from 8:30 to about 5. Calexico, I think, runs their office till 6 o'clock, and then they have classes in the evening as well. I visited my daughter in Tracy, California over the holidays, and they run their senior center from 8:30 till 4:30. And they also have some other things that go on beyond that. So I think it would be very helpful here if we would extend the senior center to a regular full business day. Okay, now you might not know this to look at me, but I'm just an old codger.
What?
Oh,
An
well,
old
that didn't go
codger.
very well, did it?
CODGER.
Oh, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to bring this back to our task force, Edgard and Efrain.
Yeah.
I think that every single one of us on the dais have met with the senior group and certainly are in full support of seeing what we can do to enhance the activities. These requests, though, and I'm glad to see we have our finance team sitting right there. These requests sound like things that we should be definitely looking at in the upcoming budget for funding starting in July, maybe.
So
or
if
next
I can just add, and perhaps wearing my other hat. So I mentioned to our seniors,
that's
and I
right,
mentioned on the dais that IDC is in the process of creating some exercise courses that we would be available to teach to our community, not just in El Centro, but throughout the Imperial Valley at no cost to them, and that one of our plans was to offer all of the cities with the opportunity to teach those courses through IVC. I do have to say that the courses that were created are not specific Zumba, Tai Chi, and yoga classes, because the designation of those as these specific disciplines carry some additional burdens on the college. So we are creating exercise courses that tend to be more generic in scope, as opposed to calling them specifically Tai Chi or yoga classes. So if the question is IVC going to be able to teach Tai Chi and yoga? The answer is no, because we're looking again to a broader scope of classes that are intended for seniors, but they're not Tai Chi, because those require specific certifications, and that's the issue that we would try to address. However, we are intending to offer those courses, again, not just in El Centro, but throughout the entire valley. I have to say that I agree with you, Madam Mayor, whether that's done through the normal budget process. I do believe that we should be targeting some funding out of Measure P, specifically for seniors. I am of the opinion that perhaps a subsidy in some applicable courses to our seniors for El Centro residents upon verification, that will be something that I can get behind. I do believe that perhaps as a one-time purchase out of the existing money to upgrade some of the furniture that is currently being used by seniors. I have gone there, as I think as most of us have, and the chairs that are being used in the common area, one, they're not very comfortable and could potentially create a hazard for our seniors. So I am in support of spending some dollars to upgrade the chairs and the equipment that is currently there. I'm also in support of perhaps extending the hours to 5 p.m. I do think that closing the center at 3 o'clock in the summer heat is not a good idea. I think that we should probably look into expanding the hours for that.
So the IVC wellness, can we call them IVC wellness classes? Okay, senior wellness classes are, do we have an ETA?
They're slated for fall.
For fall.
So September.
September, excellent. That's great. And then the purchase of chairs and maybe other, Ms. Piedra, so the purchase of chairs and maybe some different tables or just something to refresh the adult center, is that something that somebody could look into and get back to us with the price tag?
Yes, we
and
can
some ideas?
certainly, yes, we can certainly look at what the cost would be and
Maybe have a little
add it
round
to our.
table, maybe some people can go and visit different times during the day with the seniors that are currently there and maybe get some ideas.
Yes, we can evaluate that.
Be also nice to share with them the upgrades that'll be coming to the McGee Park, which I think will make it,
And if I may add to that, we actually did. We organized, because as part of the grant process, we needed to solicit community outreach. And so the map that was presented as part of your presentation was actually presented to our seniors. We
excellent.
actually
Okay.
had it physically there at the adult center. They were invited.
Okay.
And we did get feedback. And just some of the components which our seniors were very excited about is, you saw that around, and I don't know, maybe this, if you may put up that particular slide, we're very excited about this grant, because if we get it, it's really gonna be a major improvement for that park.
Yep.
And so what it
There we
is you see there's different squares around the actual park, which are in essence exercise stations, which are gonna be, available for, it opens up a lot of opportunities for us to take our seniors out when we have, good weather, and for them to do exercise throughout these different stations, which would be obviously comfortable for them and appropriate for them to do physical activity. So, we're very excited about this plan. So that's part of, again, incorporating that outdoor element to the programs. And if I just may address the point about extending our hours, that comes down basically to a personnel issue and also, obviously budget. That's why you see the request that was included in here is part of expanding our recreation to allow us the opportunity to, expand staff and obviously hours. So that's all, again, just budget related as it relates to that in terms of operating hours.
But we're kind of hoping that with the purchase of that IT module for the Parks and Recreation, that's going to free up some time.
Hopefully.
For folks that aren't doing online or doing registration and stuff over the phone and all that, so we'll balance it
Explore
out.
that. That's right.
Madam
Okay.
Mayor, just two quick comments, if I may, and you're doing a great job in facilitating this meeting. It's not, I'm so glad I'm not mayor this time, but you're doing a great job. I do want to just highlight that I do appreciate the seniors overemphasizing subsidize. So they're asking for subsidize. They're not asking for anything for free. They are asking for subsidized, and that's what I do appreciate about our seniors, the fact that they are requesting subsidized. And then I also want to recognize Councilmember Silva, because he's bringing in supplemental type of opportunities so that, our general fund budget's not feeling, most of the pressure. And then I need to do a better job in retrenching our community foundation. And so I'm going to come back here and probably in the next 30 days, and we'll be using some of that funds to also supplement and subsidize some of the senior activities as well. So I need to staff that up, kind of update the ordinance and the consolidation of the boards. But we still have some funding in there that can help the supplemental efforts of our senior activities.
If I can add just
Yes.
another point to that, Madam Mayor. So I was visited in my office by a El Centro senior who went to the extent of taking me copies of her Social Security check, as well as her rent expenses and expenses that she incurred, and just to demonstrate to me that she cannot afford any classes, any kind of payment to be able to do these activities. And that I thought that was pretty telling, and she's not unique in these circumstances. So I think with that, we've been talking about this for some time, but I think I became open to the idea of coming up with some kind of subsidy, as long as we, limit that to El Centro residents, and that we're able to provide these opportunities for our seniors.
Okay, can we agree then that the second meeting in February, we can come back with recommendations? Mr. Cardenas, you can come back with recommendations on potential funding
Right.
from the foundation. Ms. Piedra, you could come back with some potential recommendations on the furniture
Yes.
and costs associated with that. And we could maybe get some costs from the Parks and Recreation Department on what the cost would be to extend the hours at the adult center for an extra 2 hours per day. So all of that will come back the second meeting in February. With regard to the amount of the subsidy, I guess what I would be wondering is, how many people is that intended to cover? I'm trying to figure out how are those numbers calculated?
Well, if I may, Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
there's one very good point that I believe Councilmember Silva made, is that the subsidies, number one, would apply to El Centro residents only.
Only, right.
And I think that, and I'm trying to see, and maybe I can try to pull the council and staff that there would be consensus that subsidy would only apply to El Centro residents. Would that be, would we have consensus on that?
But what I'm saying is the $10,000, is that gonna be for a year for all El Centro residents who want to participate in these classes?
Right.
I just don't know how this number was calculated.
I think that we need to come up with some numbers.
Should we bounce it back to our, actually bounce it back to our community or our,
Staff needs to tell us how many people are
okay.
anticipated to show up at these classes if they're offered X number of days. Because what I'd really not want to do is allocate the $13,000 between the wellness classes and the crochet and jewelry classes, and then figure out that didn't go nearly far enough, that really we needed closer to 40,000 or something.
That's a good idea.
Is that okay? So let's get some data behind some.
So, Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
if I may, I wanted to talk to the council about a couple of things. And they were not part of the discussion when we had our task force meeting because they surfaced later, but I think that they're important to our community. So the mayor and I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with some individuals that are exploring the possibility of a convention center in El Centro, and they have some ideas. The idea of El Centro needing a convention center has been raised, I know with Mr. Jackson as well, by some other individuals. It was part of the 2050 vision goals and plans. When we first looked at this in 2015, I saw that as a long-term project for El Centro, but we keep hearing that that future is sooner than we think. So we have talked about the possibility of funding a feasibility study that would let us know if in fact El Centro is in need of a convention center, how big should it be, how do we fund it, how many events are necessary to make that self-sustaining, all those kinds of numbers and data that are pretty important. So I wanted to include that, and I don't know how much that would cost. I don't know if Mrs. Piedra has an idea how much a feasibility study of that nature would cost, but I'm asking the council to consider that as an expense that we can use out of existing funds so we can move forward with that study. And Marcela, do you have an idea how much that would be?
And I'm going to ask our Community Development Director, Ms. Villacaña, because we actually, I know she is including that as part of her budget request, and I believe, Norma, we are 150,000 more or less. And that's, again, just an estimate, just based on experience, maybe some of the other feasibility studies that we've recently done, and kind of the scope.
Could we have them do that one and the soccer field at the same time?
The other project that also surfaced after the task force with Mr. Garcia and I met, we also have seen, I think the mayor was at our old post office pavilion and the Casa de Cultura, the Culture House. That's part of our MOU with the Mexican consulate, and I think most of us have seen the performances and the number of children that are using, not just children, but our community members that are using that facility, and the enhancement of the arts. And I think our compliments to the consulate and to our staff and to the volunteers that are showing up and providing a lot of these courses and classes and workshops and so on. And they're doing it with just, tape and strings, because the infrastructure that's there is really, really substandard. It's something that needs to be upgraded for the benefit of our community. So I received this just a few days ago, which is a list that the consulate has requested that we purchase for the operation of the All Post Office Pavilion. These, for the most part, would be one-time expenditures. They're not recurring. It's just equipment that are needed and things that are needed for the enhancement of those courses that we teach at the community center, at the All Post Office. And I believe that if you look at all this, it adds up to about $15,000. And again, this will be requested as a one-time expenditure, and this will both facilitate the workshops and the sessions that are being done at the Old Post Office, as well as have a significant value to our citizens. So I'm hoping that we can kind of put this on the list and then bring it back at the next council meeting for further consideration.
They are really making just incredible addition to the community in terms of what they're able to provide. Now, those classes, there is a fee associated with those, right? So the students are paying
Right.
a portion of that. So that cost was about $15,000? Okay. Okay. Any other questions or comments before we leave Parks and Recreation? Okay. So, let's see, then,
Marcelo wanted to know if
What?
we can take a break.
Oh, okay.
Did you hear that? I thought I heard that. She said
Okay,
she needed
well,
a break.
Let me just say again, IT, ADA, all of the first phase of the Parks and Recreation projects, plus the 15,000 for the cultural arts.
Culture Center.
We're at 1.5 million, $33,427. Okay? All right. We're going to take a really quick break, folks, and then we're going to power through community enhancement, public works, and go home.
Thank you.
Really, like
Just another,
Eight-
just the $60 million.
8 o'clock. We're starting back up at 8 o'clock.
Well, they should, but that doesn't make it right.
Okay.
I have to leave by 8:15.
Okay.
I'm glad you said it was you, not me.
Okay, we've got 2 more areas to cover very quickly. We're going to go into the community enhancement projects. Mr. Jackson and I and a bunch of folks serve on that committee. The 2 items that we are moving forward with there will be with regard to the police station and the library. One of the big benefits, as you know, with regard to the library, what will significantly reduce that overall cost for us is the fact that that building was donated. Again, kudos to city staff, city manager, or city attorney for getting that all wrapped around so that we can move forward with that library project. At this point in time, we would be looking at the RFP for the master plan.
Yes.
Okay, and that's a cost of $350,000. The police station, what's next steps with regard to our feasibility study?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, good evening. So actually, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we have our kickoff meeting scheduled with our consultant. And we have an agenda where we're going to clarify milestones, goals, and actually go over the different tasks, make sure we clarify, have a common understanding of the scope in order to move forward. Initially, we have a timeline of 6 months from notice to proceed, which was actually a couple weeks ago. So that's kind of where we're at with this study.
Okay.
So we have some staff at the police department that will be participating, at least in the initial conference call, while we narrow the scope. And then from then on, we'll be developing surveys and the whole process, collecting the data they need to get started.
Okay. So at this point, we're not looking for any specific Measure P monies to be allocated to the study, because that's already
It's already funded.
funded.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
So,
so I noticed that on the On the proposed projects and within the police department
Yes.
station, there's an allocation of $3 million for right-of-way and land acquisition.
That's
Is
just a
that- okay.
placeholder because
That'll be
if,
discussed further.
yes, because there's a couple of things that have changed now, right? Is what if we decide we're gonna build the police station in our new building?
Right.
Right?
Okay.
Or what if the consultant comes back and lets us know that what you have, oh, I'm sorry. Most people think that's a good thing when they can't hear me. Ask my husband. So, would that site be appropriate, or if we can make do with the existing site? So that's a player to be named
Okay.
later cost.
Okay.
As well, and the construction cost, that's a ballpark based on what you've seen in other similar jurisdictions, right?
Correct, and we actually had a gentleman from somewhere in Central California come down, and they had ideas on how to offset some of the costs, and just
Right.
throwing some numbers around, that's what they were looking at.
Okay. Excellent, thank you.
Okay.
All right, so then the other two items, the animal control shelter, I think we've reported to council a couple of times that what we want to do is a field trip over to El Cajon. They did a very similar thing. They passed a sales tax measure that they used to fund public safety improvements, as well as move forward with an animal control shelter, which is now currently being constructed and will be completed. I think they said in July. And so we're gonna go up and take a peek. And then I read in the paper Saturday that the San Diego City Council is now looking to cease offering animal control services, including pet adoptions and the operation of shelters. And they're gonna be negotiating with the Humane Society to handle those tasks. So I think that one of the things that's kind of on a trajectory as a community enhancement project is what is it that we can do and for what amount of money to address our animal control needs here.
And Madam Mayor,
Yep.
and again, this is from a municipality standpoint as opposed to a regional standpoint, because the only grief or heartburn I may have is that we would maybe be considered the regional solution, or they may consider our proposal maybe being a regional solution, and us now doing all the heavy lifting on this. So could you maybe share on what your concept would be with maybe an animal control shelter, and what would $1 million get us?
Well, that's, yeah, and I think that the $1 million right now is a placeholder, because I was going so far as to just saying, can we do modular units, as opposed to some Taj Mahal for animals. I mean, we know that right now the Humane Society is really in dire straits. In our own facilities for animals, dire straits. We've got to do something. Just what that something is going to look like and how much it is remains to be seen. Ideally, I mean, the original study that was done, the animal needs assessment study that was done, actually looked at a regional approach. Needs assessment report for Imperial County that was done back in 2012 looked at all of the municipalities coming together and then doing a cost sharing, right? So let's say that Calexico, Hopeville, Nyland, Salton City, and some of the other outlying jurisdictions are paying a certain amount of their budget toward animal services. If we started doing the sheltering, then could we count on them pursuant to an MOU or something else to help us with our operating costs?
And that was, that was one of the discussions we had was, would we be able to enter into MOUs with all the different cities beforehand to then look at, instead of just building something that would be solely for the use of El Centro, more as a regional development that would be somewhat funded by the other cities and maybe even the county.
Yeah, and we're gonna have to look at, I mean, this was an excellent study. I thought this was probably one of the best needs assessment reports I've ever seen, and we didn't have to pay for it, or if we did, we paid maybe a fraction of the cost. But, that we've got the temporary holding shelters, we've got, base building costs and things like that. So I think that this gives us a pretty good idea as to what we might wanna be looking at. But this concept is not as far developed as a lot of our others, so this is still kind of a to be determined. Similarly, we threw in there, and we don't even have a single number attached to this, is the homeless initiatives. And one of the things, I went to the Imperial Valley Continuum of Care meeting just to kind of get a sense as to where anybody is with regard to being able to bring all of the programs and services together and say, this is the direction we want to go, and I haven't heard that yet. I know that we've made tremendous strides, but we haven't gelled to the point where we have a strategic plan. I know we've asked our city manager to take a peek and start looking at strategic plans, because once we can get that structure, we'll know that if the city of El Centro were able to pony up some dollars, what that would look like. But with regard to the homelessness initiatives, I think Mr. Cardenas, same thing.
Yeah.
Is if we build it, do we at El Centro then by default end up owning the homeless population here?
Right.
So we've just got to be very deliberate. Please.
Mayor, city councilman, and city manager, it's a simple concept as far as a facility. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate, a shelter managed by anyone. It could be as simple as the community center with the kitchen. Open in the morning, they come in the evening, they check out in the morning. During the day, it's used for something else. It can be just that simple. But we have nothing, and we haven't had anything for a while, and that's the problem.
Yeah. I know with the way the armory is looking right now, I mean, that it almost looks like it could be used for a homeless shelter without any renovation, just because it's the location and everything else. We need to get a letter to the state about the.
Yeah.
I've actually inquired about that a couple times. I think the latest issue is that they don't have the
They don't
staffing.
have a,
They don't have staffing,
a
yeah.
lawnmower.
Or the equipment, yeah.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
so that's ridiculous.
Actually, code enforcement has reached out to Home Depot, I believe, who does grants for nonprofits to see if they could provide them with a lawnmower and other equipment at no cost, and we'll follow up when we have our code enforcement meeting tomorrow.
When did the state of California become a nonprofit?
Well,
I would leave it to the governor to answer that.
They're the DOD, I mean.
when we became a sanctuary state.
I don't know, that's just a real head scratcher for me, but, and Mr. Johnson, one of the things that I'd be really curious is, we're never gonna be in the business of running
Right.
a shelter with wraparound services, but who could we, I know San Diego has a number of agencies that do exactly that.
Yeah, and there's some here that could do it, you know. There's still some funding issues, you know, with neighborhood house, Catholic Charities, even Women's Haven could possibly do it. The type of facility I'm talking about won't require a lot of staff to manage that, because you're gonna only probably have about 50 to 100 in there. So staff of 5 could probably handle that, because they're only gonna stay there at night, they're checking out in the morning. So all you need is a setup of the cots to feed them, a lot of volunteers. It would be very easy to do.
Okay.
I think, you know, to speak to something the mayor mentioned is that I think where the concern is with that is that we build it, or we have an opportunity to use facilities, and then we own that population. And I think that's one of the knocks that the business community has right now with the city is that we have some very well-meaning nonprofits out there that are doing a great service, but they are, by virtue of them providing a great service to these people, they've caused us to have issues on the other side with social, mental health, and criminal, with the influx of homelessness into the city of El Centro, because they know that they can get, you know, a hot meal in the morning and a hot meal in the evening.
Right.
But during the day, where are those people going? They're gravitating around some of our businesses in the downtown. They might be panhandling around some of our restaurants. And so unfortunately, there's this nexus to good deeds that is not always positive. And so the balancing act that we have with that is we have to keep our business community and our residents in thought process when we're trying to figure out how do we deal with this issue. And it's the same issue that all cities are dealing with right now. But I think predominantly, and I think, Bill, you probably could speak to this, is as a business owner downtown, is that, you know, I'm hearing well, what are you doing with these people during the daytime when they're out bothering my customers or sitting in front of my storefront or, you know, doing all the things that are maybe negative for a business? And so that, I think, is the big question is, do we have something like at the Armory? Let's, just for instance, so if all those people are checking out, we have 100 homeless people checking out of the Armory at 7 or 8 in the morning, where are they gonna go?
Yeah.
They're gonna go in front of Bill's place downtown. So then does that cause now an impact to social services, to mental health, to our law enforcement community of having to deal with that population that just doesn't really have any place to go during the day? And so I think that's the hard part with that.
Yeah, and I know that I've told you guys this several times. The preview of coming attractions is that the League of California Cities, in partnership with the California counties, are coming out with a white paper on strategies for addressing homelessness. So I'm hoping that we can use that to kind of build on what we see as initiatives that would actually move the needle, but at the same time not allow us to adopt the problem in its entirety.
Okay. Well, Marcella and I have met, and we've toured facilities and properties and thought of some of the same ideas.
Okay.
But you're right, where they're going to go during the day
Right.
is an issue.
Yeah.
There's no programs to
Right.
keep them going.
Right.
You need that and a lot of other things, really.
Yeah.
But funding is still just
Right.
the major problem.
But, you know, even if we did some funding for like bin storage, right? We've talked about that. Somewhere where folks can keep their possessions during the day, you know, locked up and secure, as opposed to having to borrow shopping carts or, you know, feel like they need to sleep with all their stuff around them or whatever, so.
Yeah, but still,
But-
they're not in a program where
Right,
they're off the
exactly.
street. That's
So
the
ultimately,
problem.
we need to get them to the services that they need. So, all right, so there's a big to be determined.
Question mark
But we
there.
really appreciate you being here. You're
No
going to be
problem.
part of the solution for us.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, please. And let me just give everybody a tally update, adding the $350,000 for the RFQ master plan development for the library. We're at $1,083,427.
But, Madam Mayor, we did exclude the 1.7 million from the police though, right? The design and
Yeah, because
environmental?
that's already
Right.
been
And then
funded.
what did we say with the 80,000 real quick before Mr. Caldwell comes up? The 80,000 for the design for the environmental, animal control?
You talking about the animal control?
We did not include that
Include
yet.
that, okay.
Okay, all right.
Sorry to take your time because I know you guys are busy.
No, never.
I've actually had this scenario happen already once, and I know it's a big problem with the homeless. I was running stores up in the Indio in Palm Springs area, and they had talked about doing a shelter. And so you should have seen the money fly in. Indio says, we're gonna build a shelter, but we want cooperation from all the other cities. Man, they were getting millions and millions and millions. Here, build a Taj Mahal in your city. The crime rate doubled in the city that had, what was Indio. They brought it in. The buildings I had in Indio, Palm Springs were perfect, everything else was nice, Cat City, et cetera. We had people committing suicide in the back of the store. We had, I mean, it was a disaster. And again, it's because there are no programs. And what we're seeing even with San Diego, now they've taken and they built a tent city.
Right.
What they're trying to do is help get people the help they need in one
Transition.
area. But again, they took it away from their business community, away from their residential community, and they put it into where they could segregate. And I hate that word, it sounds terrible. But that's the only way they could help these people that want to be helped. Because we have already gone back, and I remember back when Mr. Solomon was here. He went out and did a survey, and basically there was about 75% of the people said, leave me alone. I want to do my drugs. I'm here for you guys to give me free methadone. Leave me alone. And unfortunately, I would just hate to see us take that burden on because it would hurt the business community greatly.
Thank you,
for your
Mr.
time.
Thank you,
Caldwell.
sir.
Okay, so, yes, please, come on up.
So I do want to clarify something that was mentioned right now.
Yes,
The feasibility study itself that we have the kickoff meeting tomorrow is funded.
Right.
But up there on the list, the design environmental, that's the actual consultant work to do The work after the feasibility study is not funded.
Right, but
So-
the feasibility study is going to take us through, because that design and environmental money wouldn't be incurred until,
After the feasibility study
Right.
is done.
What's the timeline on that? Do you know?
So 6 months from notice to proceed is our timeline, which would put us, 5.5 months from now.
Got time.
okay? We got time. All right, so let's move on. Any questions about the community enhancement part? Okay, last one. Public Works, you spendthrifts, you. Alex and Ephraim, who wants to?
No, well, I'm gonna ask for a little bit of Abraham's help again, Mr. Campos's help.
Okay.
And, again, very challenging list. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of soft cost requests. They're all hard costs. But, again, these are some interesting projects. They do align with the safety and legal. You got some paving and resurfacing of some projects that we can look at. I know, and just so I know, Madam Mayor, where are we at as far as tally goes?
1.883427, and let me see if I've got what you wanted. $500,000 for the parking lot resurface, restripe. $119,000 for the OPOP. $300,000 for the library. $430,000 for the re-roofing of city buildings, and $50,000 for to stabilize the library and the surrounding area. Did I get that all right?
So that would put us over though, right? Correct?
No.
Oh, no? Okay. So I think we are within striking distance,
That doesn't
Mr.
mean you can
Campos?
have anything else.
All right. So I think we're in striking distance if those are all vetted, important projects, and those are the projects that we came to a consensus on. And I would classify those as priority projects. Would you agree, Mr. Campos?
Yes.
And
So,
go ahead, sir.
So what you have in front of you is some of the soft costs that are not there actually. What you're gonna have there is a soft cost, and part of it is because we can do some of these projects. They're small enough in nature that we can do them in-house and get them out immediately. So instead of soft costs, they're in the straight out construction. For example, parking lot resurfacing. Between all of them, that's about $1 million, $500,000 for the city parking lots, and we have received quite a bit of requests for resurfacing of our downtown, for parking lot for ADA compliance and for just general maintenance. The parking lot at the OPOP is heavily used, and it's in dire need of an overlay as well. And in the parking lot in front of the library for another $300,000, that's obviously been requested quite a bit as well. With the libraries, the one library that we have in the city, so we do get the use over there. So those are the immediate costs that we can do right now. There's quite a bit of re-roofing that we need to do. You'll see it categorized as 0 to 2 years, 3 to 6 years. That's the expected life that we see that we have in them. The ones that are 0 to 2 is price that we need to do ASAP. They're in such a shape that we need to get out there and get them fixed. The ones that are 3 to 6 years is projects that we can discuss tonight or later on, but they need to be addressed in the interim time frame. One that we need to move forward right away is the one that's number 5 in your agenda, the re-roofing of the Valley Center Point Library and surrounding area. That's a $50,000 request to go out there and not let more water go in. As you know, there's some water that's gone in through the rains, and there's some issues that we need to be addressed. But it's a stopgap measure. We need to go in there, and now that we have access to the property, and basically patch while we figure out what to do with the master plan out there, which would do the permanent repairs.
What I think it's important to say is that last time we had major rains and we had damage to a lot of our library equipment and stuff,
Correct.
that was covered under the previous owner's insurance, which now we are the owners. So
Right.
if we have the same issue happen again, it's going to be on our dime to replace whatever gets damaged.
Yeah, and our maintenance staff is aware of that, and they've done some repairs along with that in conjunction with the previous owner. But there's more that is needed. There's some areas that obviously were not paying attention about the water because nobody is using them, and there were really no complaints, but the damage was done. So, and that brings us into the I guess on well, the one soft cost that we have here is Parks Maintenance Facility Shop Design. So that's 292,000 to get the design and environmental going for that project. And the public works median improvements, that's in line with the beautification efforts that we're trying with the city to make the corridor better. We can do the design environmental, get that going, and get a shovel ready and ready to go. So that's a quick summary of the things that we can do. I skipped through the bond money because there's where we get into the $1 million projects under the very right column. And on the Imperial Avenue extension, again, those would be bond monies that we can talk about later.
So what's our tally at
Okay,
now?
so guys, we are at about $3.2 million.
That's with all 1 through 5, right?
Yes.
So,
What I'm wondering is, can we come back at our next meeting with that list and just say, this is the first round of things that we want to fund out of the gate? And it'd be, if I've done my math right,
3.2.
about $3.2 million, and we can move that, at least that first round of things out the door. I'm looking at my finance folks right there. Maybe?
Gather my thoughts. There's so much going on, and I'm just panicking about all these projects. I just want to make sure that as we move forward and we make those recommendations of using monies for those various projects, soft cost and pre-construction, that it's projects that are actually, that we actually will have the money to pay for. As you know, some of these major projects, like for example, the police station, initially we're saying 28 million. If it comes up to, I don't know, 50, 40, then some of those other projects down the list are gonna have to just fall off.
Absolutely.
And if we spend the money, the ongoing revenues on soft cost studies or whatever that may be, then those monies are going, if we don't move forward with those projects, then we'll be losing that money. That money would be better served addressing the projects, other projects that will be funded with bond proceeds. I think one of the recommendations that I also would like to make is that maybe I bring the financial advisor, run some numbers to determine what our actual bonding capacity is, because we started this process back in 2016. Back then, rates were lower. Rates are moving up, and if we plan on issuing bonds in another year, the rates projected at this point in time, and we're being conservative, is 4.5%, which means that our monies that will be left over for those projects will be less. As the interest rate moves up, the money that we will have is lower. We ran some numbers, and I had, for example, for totaling all the projects, it's 73 million at 4% for 28 years. That's $4.5 to $5 million, which is the total amount of the revenues coming in. That would not leave any monies available for increase in operational expenditures of those
Right.
bigger facilities. It would not leave any money available for that cushion. It would not leave any money available we need to have enough monies to be able to make that initial debt service. That means that the initial debt service is $5 million. We need to be able to cover that. Additional personnel from those new facilities. So in other words, as we move forward and we decide which projects we're going to address out of ongoing revenues, let's make sure that those are projects that we're actually going to be able to cover out of the bond proceeds in the future. Limited resources, that means that we want to avoid wasting those monies. Let me see what else.
Which I think is why we give it one more look. I think that we've been extraordinarily diligent in getting to this point and in identifying very specifically the thought process that went into getting us to this point. I think that the things that we have identified tonight that make up that roughly 3.2, 3.3 million is a very good mix of one-time costs that take care of some very, very critical needs right now, as well as forming the basis for the studies to help us determine this, what's going to work for us in the future, and allow us to make that second round of budget priorities. So I'm over the moon. I'm really, really thrilled that, you know, we were able to get through this process and that we didn't have any one thing that kind of tipped us over. I think that we were able to do a really good job of balancing the funding in all of the different critical key areas. And I would like to see us come back with this item. And Marcella, if you need a list of what we've kind of agreed to or not.
Yes, and actually, Madam Mayor, I was going to ask, just so from staff standpoint, that we make sure we kind of follow what maybe
Okay.
those priorities are going to be, and we can definitely bring it back at your first meeting in February to
Okay.
kind of just summarize. But based on direction and priorities for the ADA, and I'm just going to go based on working group. So
Yes.
ADA IT, I understand, or we understand, that you want us to consider the full amount for the 4 projects, which is the $858,421.
Correct.
Okay. For the community enhancement, at this point, basically only setting aside $350,000 for the RFP to do the master plan development for the Valley Center Point Shopping Center redevelopment.
Which would include our permanent library location.
That's correct. So that's $350,000. And then for parks and recreation category, basically considering the soft cost requests for those 1 through 5 projects, which total $660,006. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And for the public works projects, basically considering 1 through 5 priorities, which amount to approximately 1.4 million.
Correct.
Which includes the parking lot resurfacing for both our downtown parking lots, the old post office, immediately in front of the library, re-roofing for city buildings, and of course, the remediation for the roofing along the library and surrounding area.
Right, and we're identifying alternatives funding for our cultural arts as well as our senior enhancements.
And if I may just clarify, we actually have that request included as part of our budget that's going to be presented to you. So, you know, you'll see that when our finance department brings that forward to you. You know, what at that point would be the funding source that's going to be considered as part of that budget process.
Madam Mayor, my only question would be if maybe on item number 4, under Public Works, if we were to consider, seeing that the lifespan of several of the roofing, the city buildings that need re-roofing are 3 to 6 years, the one that seems like it's the priority is the Conrad Harrison Youth Center at $60,000. If we were to consider that up front and maybe defer the other, what would be $370,000, and maybe look, you know, that that gives us a little bit of breathing room, but B, also,
Well, remember, we're, at this point, we have 3.1 million, right? But in our first full year of funding through April, we're thinking
we'll
we're
have
gonna
some
be
more,
at
yeah.
5.
Well, and the only thing that
What
I
jumps out
really
at
like,
you?
the one thing that jumps out to me is the median improvements on Fourth and Adams. And I know that there's some contingency basis on getting that allocated over from Caltrans before, or maybe we do the median improvements before that. I don't know how that works. But when we talk about immediate impacts to the community, things that are going to be visually apparent to the community, that we're spending their tax dollars to beautify the city. We get, I know I get a lot, I'm sure everybody does, gets a lot of comments about how poorly that gateway, corridor to the city looks, and we got palm trees that haven't had heads on them for 10, 15 years, and they're all dead. I'm just thinking, if we were to do that, the impact it would have to that whole corridor and help beautify the city, and every single resident we have is going to see that as an immediate impact to their sales tax dollars that they're giving to the city. So that's
Well,
that's one
let me ask you this. So the state of California is flush with cash, right?
They are.
What we just talked about, all the money that's going into the rainy day fund and everything else.
$7 billion.
That median, that's their responsibility, right? So what, in terms of maintenance and all of that, okay?
Maintenance, but not beautification.
Maintenance. So
Okay,
Caltrans
but-
will basically just keep it the way it is, status
okay,
quo.
but if we sent a letter to Caltrans and said, look, we're getting ready to build a state-of-the-art, beautiful aquatic center, it's gonna be up and running in 2019, do you think you could plant some palm trees and do some improvements here? At least meet us partway, can we do that?
It's definitely worth a try. I
And
can,
by the way,
we
give
can
it to
reach
us.
out.
Well, let's
I
at
mean-
least ask them to, let's take some pictures of what it looks like now, send them a rendering of our aquatic center, put them on notice that they've got a year and a half to come up with some money to fix this, and then if they don't do it, then let's see what we can do about
Yeah.
putting some stuff out there. But it's really the state of California's responsibility, and they screwed us on the whole, sorry, they didn't treat us really well when it came to the Dogwood overpass. I think they owe us on that one.
We'll reach out.
I'm all for the state paying for something for once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would totally support that if there's a chance that we can get something from the state. And I do think that there's no chance of that perhaps that project should be moved up our priority. Because I agree with
Yeah.
Mr. Jackson that that's a key corridor in the city that I think if we manage to beautify that, that would be a significant
I'm
improvement.
very forward-thinking, given that our aquatic center and everything else is going over there.
And I wonder that letter and those pictures should they go to Caltrans or should they go to our state legislators?
Everybody, send it to everybody.
Well, let me just put it this way.
What could it hurt?
I think that, well, I don't know that Caltrans necessarily likes getting the electeds involved before they have a chance to respond. Now, if
We'll
they
work
come
with
back and
staff.
tell us no, that's when you get your electeds
So
involved.
give them a 30-day window to say yes or no. And then, well, you know, I mean,
It's Caltrans.
and I know that sounds silly, but on the flip side,
Takes them 30 days to open it.
I know, but you know, we don't need them sitting on it for a year before they say no. If they're gonna say no, then let them say no soon, so then we can either take that next step to get our state legislators involved or figure out how to fund it ourselves.
Well, but let's be very, very specific in our request
Yeah,
of what we
need
want.
to, yeah,
right?
exactly. So I guess that was my question to you back is, what level of effort do you expect from Caltrans to do something like the pictures that we talked about, or to go and take down the palm trees, put new ones up and that's it, or to take out the asphalt and
I
bring
think
in
we
new?
ask for a lot, and then if they come back with something little bit less, it's gonna be a win for us.
Tell them we'll
I
pay for
just-
the design if they do all the construction.
That picture that Liz showed us, that was nice.
That was beautiful.
Well,
Make it look like that.
And that's what
I'm
you
good.
see throughout Coachella Valley, is all their medians like that.
Yeah. On,
Of course, they have-
Dr. Ryan
they
come
have-
back
They
or
have
no?
signs on their overpasses
Okay.
too in Coachella Valley.
Yeah.
Don't. Chris,
Keep in mind, there is no irrigation in those medians whatsoever.
so how do we fix that?
Water truck.
Well, it's part of the cost. It's just not the median itself. You're digging up the street, adding a water line for irrigation down all of it every so often. So just to get the irrigation, it's part of doing landscaping.
Okay,
But
well, you know,
it's a
they're
cost.
gonna be spending a gazillion dollars when we're getting a new border inspection station on the way up 86. They're gonna open it up to 2 lanes. They're spending like, I don't know, $1.2 million or something.
Now,
Outrageous to build a 10.
If I may, can I clarify on a community development project for the police station? I know that 1.7 was not included and it's not, it will take us over to 3.6. But maybe we can put a placeholder for future funding for the rest of the fiscal year to get that funding. That is
Yeah.
crucial to be able to get the bond in time.
I think what we're doing is we are kind of looking at the 3.1 that we have right now. And we think we've spent that tonight. And then we'll look at, potentially another $2 million between now and the April 1st anniversary date. So what goes in that bucket? And then the longer range bonding, what does that look like?
Okay, thank you.
Okay? We good?
Yes.
So,
That's, so it took us about 2 hours and 40 minutes to spend $3 million, so.
Yeah.
Not bad.
Not bad.
Again, we could not have done it without all of the input from staff. We really, really appreciate everything that you've done. It's a game changer for the city of El Centro, and we all appreciate it. Thank you. Yay. Awesome sauce.